Hello, I'm Corey Redderkop, Director of Policy with the Burnaby Board of Trade, and I'm here joined with Alison Gu, who's running in the by-election to join Burnaby City Council this month. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're, as the Board of Trade, we're the Chamber of Commerce here in Burnaby, and we work to support local businesses and employers and entrepreneurs. And our mission is really to be the catalyst for economic growth and to grow and maintain business here, to convene business and community leaders across the spectrum, where everyone interested in business can find a home. And we're a champion and an advocate for the interest of local businesses. So with an election coming up on June 26th for our city council, we wanted to make sure that we were sharing information with our network. So we've asked all the candidates to meet us for these short videos to share a bit about why they're running and to help all of you watching get a sense of what your choices are for the election. So let's get started. I've got today, as I mentioned, Alison Gu. Hi, Alison. To start off, did you want to take a few moments to share a little bit about yourself, your background, why you're running for City Council this time?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Alison Gu. I'm running for Burnaby City Council to fight for climate justice, affordable housing, and for anti-racism and equity to be embedded into every policy that there is. And when I talk about climate justice, I mean focus on people as we make sure that we tackle climate change at the urgency that it requires. To me, this means providing support to fossil fuel workers in the transition, ensuring that we have good, green jobs for those same workers, and making sure that we invest in the infrastructure that will help our communities thrive. I believe that we need to invest in truly affordable housing for all, low carbon infrastructure, and most importantly, and in people. When we do that, the economic returns as well as the returns on health and well-being will be many, many times what we put in. I attended McGill University for my bachelor's degree, and I was born and raised in Burnaby.
Perfect. Well, welcome again. Thanks for taking the time to be here today. To get a sense of your thoughts on some specific areas, you mentioned a few of them there that are of particular concern to us and our members in the business community. We want to ask a couple of questions to all the candidates across a number of different areas. So you mentioned housing, so maybe we'll jump in there. We were part of the mayor's task force on community housing, and we've had a number of principles that we're looking at how we can get housing across the spectrum, but also we're quite concerned on that missing middle, the housing for people who might be in full-time employed. They might be a part of a family with two incomes, and they still aren't able to afford necessarily homes in Burnaby. Do you have any thoughts just broadly around what should be done to support affordable housing for our workforce? Often there might be affordable housing or options for people who are on a low income, and we can discuss whether that's adequate. And if you're of a high income, you don't need as much support, but people who are workers and part of our workforce often are overlooked or not eligible for many of the programs. Do you have any thoughts around that missing middle support?
Yes, absolutely. So I think the biggest thing to keep in mind when we go about housing is that we need to ensure that the housing that we build is purpose-built. And what I mean by that is a lot of the condos and apartment buildings that were in the Metrotown areas, or in the Brentwood areas, they have been, particularly in the Metrotown areas, they've been replaced with luxury housing, and that will support the people who can afford it. But at $2,000 a month, a lot of workers, even with a double income, can't afford that housing. So ensuring that whatever we're doing, we're not just simply replacing units at a one-to-one level. We are ensuring that we keep in mind who these units are targeted towards. And any affordable housing project that we do build, I think, should be a mix. And it should have different levels of non-market, market, affordable housing, and rental that will help to subsidize the affordable housing that is in the building. I also think that it's important for the city to continue to leverage tools like legislation in all developments and facilitate options like secondary suites and laneway housing, zoning, and ensure that we're putting homes near businesses, shops, and jobs, and vice versa, because this not only helps to boost the local economy, but helps to create complete communities that will help us meet our climate goals and our transportation goals as well.
So you mentioned that the different housing forms there and complete communities. Is that, so you mentioned and laneway housing and carriage homes and those types of things. What are your thoughts on one of our principles or our ideas around, gentle density, about not just laneway homes, but row homes, townhomes, things that we don't seem to have a big inventory of that section of housing in Burnaby. So is there a way that we can move gentle density throughout the city so it's not just focused on either condos in the town centers or the single family homes in the neighborhoods, but is there something we can do in the middle there? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think that we need to be, looking at all the options that we have. And one of the most effective options, in my opinion, is to ensure that density is implemented throughout the city. Because this helps to ensure that local businesses and economies can thrive by not, just concentrating certain homes around certain areas and having urban sprawl in the rest of the city. But it also helps to make sure that we are building kind of resilient communities that allow people to have relationships with each other and foster the kinds of relationships that will help us tackle some of our biggest issues.
Okay, great. Thank you. You mentioned complete communities, and that was one of our recommendations for the city's transportation plan. The city is currently undergoing a redo of that, and we had 22 recommendations, a few of which were focused around creating more complete communities so people didn't have to travel so far to get goods and services. Some of our other recommendations were around more north-south roads, protecting some of those parking hubs and business districts so you could drive to the Heights, for example, once and then do all your shopping in that area. So you may have one driving trip instead of 10, perhaps, and improving transportation amenities on transit routes so it's more appealing to take. Do you have any thoughts on your priorities or what you think should be the goals and initiatives at the city level for improving transportation as the city finalizes its plan? And that would be something that you'd be voting on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that number one, creating complete communities is absolutely the gold standard to make sure that, goods and services are within a 15-minute walk wherever you are in the city. That will take time to get to, but I believe that it's incredibly important to try to speed up those goals wherever possible. I also think that the best way to decrease traffic is by doing what you say is to invest in alternative modes of transportation and to make things like public transit more appealing to people. Public transit, while it is a provincial jurisdiction primarily, there are lots of things that the city can do to, connect routes better, to connect cycling and walking infrastructure to public transit routes, and to, as you say, making public transit a more appealing and convenient and comfortable mode to get.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm going to pivot a little bit from we're going all over the place. I'm going to pivot from transportation back to planning, because planning and zoning is one of the big things that cities are responsible for. And we mentioned kind of complete communities and moving maybe businesses closer into with residential so that you can have more services and goods closer to hand. One of the areas we'd be concerned is the reverse of that. Would be around the erosion of industrial lands, of allowing residential to move into light industrial and industrial space, which the region, by some estimates, will run out of industrial land capacity by mid-decade. Would you be supportive of protecting and preserving industrial lands, or making sure that as, say, neighborhoods that might be light industrial now redevelop as part of the official community plan, that we find areas for those businesses to go that are within our city so that we're not forcing them to leave for farther flung jurisdictions?
Absolutely. And I think this goes back to the question around gentle density and why zoning is incredibly important to ensuring we protect housing as well as industrial areas and businesses, because I do believe that there is the space, there is the ability to get housing into our city at the stock that we require without eroding too far into areas that are right now primarily industrial. And I don't think that rezoning, just mass rezoning of industrial land is going to by any means fix our problems. In fact, it's going to create a lot more. But I think looking at the solutions we have, which is areas where there are currently single family homes, trying to kind of transition large higher density homes into those areas, and mixing housing together is going to be our best solution towards our housing problems while preserving businesses and industry.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to pick up on one of the things you said in your very first opening comments there around your priorities on climate. The Board of Trade in Burnaby here has for 15 years been advocating that climate is a business issue, and that we need to get ahead of regulations, that we need to be doing what we need to do to move ourselves in the right direction around climate change prevention and mitigation. What do you think there's lots of different levels of responsibility on this. What do you think is within the remit of the city to do? What should the city, how should the city combat the impacts of climate change and mitigate its own activities and contributions to that issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of what I see as fiscal responsibility is preparing for the impacts of climate change and their costs. We know that municipalities, businesses, families will be at the front lines of climate-induced events like floods, droughts, heat waves, and all of these events are going to have negative impacts on the economy and local businesses. They're also going to impact jobs, like similarly how the pandemic really impacted jobs negatively, the supply chain, consumers, and the municipal budgets as they respond to these events. So I believe that it's in the best interests of all of our communities, as well as taxpayers, to be investing in proactive solutions now that will not only help us when we need these solutions to come into play, but also in preventing how extreme the damage is and to mitigate the impacts that we know are going to be coming, because we've locked in, a degree of warming already, and we know that these are going to come with impacts in 10, 20 years. We're already seeing the first kind of hints of those impacts. And in order to ensure that local businesses and individuals aren't taking the brunt of that hit, like how it was the pandemic was very unprecedented. Climate change is precedented. We know that it's coming. So in order to protect everybody, we need to be preparing for that now.
And on that, where do you see the balance for the city itself on being a leader in this space and taking actions, and whether it's on the built environment or the fleets or whatever it's doing for itself, how much of a leadership role do you think the city should take on showing what can be done around carbon neutrality or environmental sustainability in this space?
I think in general, I think governments always have the responsibility to lead and to provide, facilitate investments and to invest in these kinds of initiatives. I think there's absolutely room for a lot of entrepreneurship and private leadership to come into play. And we know that with something as widespread and drastic as climate change is going to be, similar to the pandemic, we need all sectors coming in and providing solutions. And there are spaces for private businesses, individuals, nonprofits, organizations to all come in and combat climate change in a way that creates jobs and promotes the economy.
Okay, great. We're galloping through our time here, so I'm going to try to squeeze in a couple more questions if you don't mind. One's going to be a little bit of a pet peeve of mine and our members, and it's going to be about property tax, but not what you might expect with coming at with a city lens. One of the biggest challenges that we are facing is the issue of highest and best use. I don't know if you've come across this, but this is where BC Assessment looks at a property. So it's a small bakery on maybe a busy thoroughfare. So it's a small bakery now, but you could put a 20-story tower on there as part of the zoning. So there's redevelopment potential. So the value of the property goes up, and therefore the tax bill gets passed along congruently. So the business, as opposed to being taxed as a one-level bakery, is being taxed as if it's a tower. Now, this is a provincial problem, but we've been working closely with the city staff and council try to raise this through UBCM and with the province. So whether on this issue in specifics or in general around making sure that the business tax rate is competitive and that we're being aligned with other jurisdictions in the region, where would you think, would you be an ally in our push for business taxes to be fair and transparent, and where we have these issues that we can find solutions?
I'm always for fairness and transparency, always. I think with regards to this specific situation that you're talking about, the context really matters there. So I don't know if I would be able to kind of answer for specific scenarios in the future if I am elected. But what I will say is that I am certainly pro small and medium businesses and supporting the local economy. I know that the provincial government is, one of the tax issues that is coming up this year is that the commercial property tax rates for this year are kind of going back to the usual, where they are taking the approach that they've taken in previous years. And a lot of small, medium-sized businesses are still trying to bounce back from the pandemic and the negative impacts that the pandemic has brought. So I think that wherever possible, the city is dedicated to advocating on behalf of, business partners, stakeholders, to advocate towards the provincial government. I think, again, coming back to zoning, zoning is one potential tool that the city could leverage in this specific scenario. But I also think that it's important for the city to take actions wherever it can and not just try to advocate at different levels, because there are a lot of things that the city can do, such as, taking what I know is the Board of Trade's sidewalk suggestion to put in patios on curb lanes to help businesses, especially restaurants and cafes, to weather the pandemic. And I would support continuing those permits throughout the summer and in following years, because I think that is boosts our economy and helps our community, and is something that is squarely in the court of the city's control. So I do certainly know that one big issue that comes up is not always in our jurisdiction, and that we certainly will do whatever we can to advocate towards the different levels of government that are in charge of those jurisdictions. But I also believe that the city has a lot of responsibility to facilitate the businesses' activities and the local economy.
Okay, great. And I'll throw my last question here, and then we'll let you go and wrap up the video here. If elected, you'll be obviously a new voice on council, and one of the things that we've seen as a result of the pandemic is what we've called the orientation to yes, and it's been a positive development in our eye that businesses at all levels seem to have been willing to move on issues that they never would entertain before, and at speeds that were unprecedented. We got programs developed in 3 weeks that would have taken 4 years. We're hoping that kind of orientation and attitude can continue, that governments can say, hey, maybe we can be a bit faster on these things. Maybe we can be a bit more open to new ideas and a bit more entrepreneurial. Try something, adjust it on the fly, and try to come up with solutions and not try to foresee everything and delay it in that sense. What's your thought on responsiveness and speed with which business or government can operate, and we call it the speed of business? Would you be able to help bring that to City Hall?
One of the criticisms that I've gotten is that young people try to speed things along too much. So I will certainly be an advocate for getting things going quicker. I know that the big criticisms around governments is often bureaucracy, whereas the level and speed at which businesses and private enterprises can move is much more efficient in many ways. A lot of this, I think, comes down to consultation and ensuring that we are doing consultation and representing the voices of Burnaby residents as best as we can. So I do recognize that, but I'm certainly in your camp that we need to move faster on a lot of our responding to a lot of the issues that we face today. And I will certainly be an advocate for that.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And thank you, Alison, for your comments across the board and sharing your thoughts with us and taking the time today. For those of you watching, we encourage you to check out all the videos. As we said, we've invited all the candidates to do these discussions with us ahead of the by-election later this month. So make sure you take a look out for those and get out there and vote on the 26th of June. So Alison, thanks so much. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much, Corey.